It's a beautiful day to blaze some good, a beautiful day to blaze some good. Would you be kind? Please light mine. All right. So, this week's episode of Beans and Greens This is the cloning episode. So we've had some things coming out in files, and they confirmed a lot of conspiracies that a lot of people like myself have been sort of pontificating in the circles. The circles of discussion around the country. Sat many a times with either one of these or a blunt with a bunch of friends around the computer going over all the old fucking documentaries and shit. Then we get... Okay, so let me back up. We're going over all these different theories, right? Watching different documentaries. Some of us read different books and heard different things, had different experiences, right? Then we have a release of these files. Now, these files tell a story. Now, the story this tells, it kind of lays out in shocking clarity and detail of all the conspiracies, right? Now, you look at the two separate situations. You have those of us, the uninitiated, pontificating, I love that word, about all these different things, right? And, of course, we're just normal, everyday, average Joe Schmo. None of this shit could be real, right? It's in movies, so we know it being in movies, we it's cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. You see it in the movie that it can't be real. But then again, you have all these people, the whistleblowers, essentially. Not essentially, actually. They're telling you, hey, X, Y, and Z is going on. But it's always dismissed. So, when we come out to find out from these files, we come to find out that this stuff is in these files. Now, it's hard to dismiss because there are real world consequences that we see coming about. And not for them, the people actually doing this shit, but for us. It's crazy, right? So, on previous episode, I touched on the ceremonies that they actually go through. It's sort of their initiation. It's sort of solidarity amongst the devils. That was Eyes Wide Shut, right? So the funny thing is, all these episodes and stuff that I'm doing, it's all been planned out. And my premise about these movies is about this is stuff that's actually happening in real life. And Eyes Wide Shut was definitely one of those movies where it's like, are they really showing this? Is this real? And there's so much stuff that's been coming out in the news over the years that can says, maybe, but these files confirmed it. One of the things that this files confirmed, right, is this thing. It's a simple thing. We call it cloning, right? So what's cloning? It's taking the cells from a person and recreating a whole nother person from the cells from that person. Now, what's the object for the object of doing this? So some of the things I was sort of talking about when I was viewing the movies, there was two reasons. One, and this was fascinating. It was very, the first one part was very fascinating in the idea of what cloning can do. It's about life extension. So you, a person that has maybe, okay, so I'll just use myself as an example. Let's say if I was one of these rich millionaires, and like a few years ago, I had my heart attack. Let's say it wasn't from having clogged arteries. Let's say I had a bad heart. Now, I had taken out the insurance policy, cost me a good bit of change. You know what I mean? 5 million. They go to the clone of me, take the heart, replace it. Right? Oof. Now, the first movie talks specifically about that. The island. So, the idea behind the island is it really explores a couple of things. One thing I mentioned watching the movie was the efficacy. Is it ethical? And one of the things that you see that can really put the efficacy in question in this movie, you see the clones. First off, they don't know they're clones, right? I mean, obviously, you don't want them to know they're clones. But the thing you see is these people have grown personalities. They've grown. They have needs. Now, these clones live in sort of a rigidly, rigidly regimented society. Rigidly regimented. Say that at least twice without fucking up. Anyway, a bit of a mumble mouth. These clones, right? These clones that have grown personalities, they've grown to have aspirations, they've grown to have desires. What we see in this is when they create the clones, they have to program the clones. So one of the scenes that we see is that once they actually hatch these clones, they start to program them. And you see a room where they have these screens over their eyes, and they're pumping in this information. They're basically imprinting the memories of the donor into the insurance policy. And it's funny the tactics they use, right? Because you see them pumping in stuff into their eyes. Tell, lie, vision. Television. I mean, we do it to ourselves every day, sitting there pumping shit into our eyes, and it's through those visuals, we're being programmed. We're allowing ourselves to be programmed. But in this scenario, it was necessary in order to make this an actual person, right? It's to give them memories, give them experiences. Now they're doing this. They're doing these things. They're they're keeping these insurance policies in sort of rigid, like I said, regimented society in order to keep the bodies healthy, because you need, you basically when you're transporting organs or whatever it is, you want healthy donors. They even had it so much where they would clone a woman, impregnate her with the husband's baby batter. Then she was basically a surrogate. So this is even more fucked up, because if you're an organ donor, they just kill you outright and take your organs. But with a basically human incubator, they would the woman would give birth, then they would off the woman, and then take the baby to the parents. But the funny thing is, right, it was a clone of the original woman. So when he brought the baby over to the original host, to the first DNA, the first, the actual woman, it was the same person, right? It really, when you look at it, it really fucks you up. And they used all these sort of sensory things to control them. It was like I said, you had the TV, you had mind control, you had a big thing of societal control, because what happens is, once you start pumping these ideas, then people themselves start controlling other people to keep people online. One of the things they also mentioned, right? This is real funny. I mean, of course, they had women and men in the same areas, but they kept them. They let them interact all to a certain point. Because you could only have so much proximity. They had proximity monitors, and they had proximity people there that were watching. They make sure that you didn't get too close to each other, especially if it was man and woman. And they eliminated sex. But of course, you when you think about life, right? Life is unpredictable when it's. I mean, even with all the controls, even with how regimented things were, still people start to question, right? So it's just mad, because think about it in society. When you start to question the matrix, essentially, when you start to question it, there's always something to. It's either to correct the behavior, and if the behavior is not corrected, then they off you. And it was just like that in the movie. Again, see, there's parallels. But one of the things in this movie that was. I mean, it was so prevalent in all of the different movies, is there's always a hidden hand that controls things, right? And that hidden hand, it's just that we're used in such a way. I mean, the best way to describe it is the Matrix, fuel. They basically used humans for fuel to power the Matrix. In this movie, humans used other copies of themselves in order to extend their life, if they were come across sort of death, basically, the ways to cheat death. Now, these are things, like I mentioned before, that we were talking about sitting around the computer, sitting around the table with cups of coffees and joints and beers and whatever have you. These are the things that we talked about, but we see it played out in movies. And that's another theme that I always sort of push across all of the different movies that I sort of ascribe to. Each of these movies, it leads to cognitive dissonance. Of course, it's in the movie. It can't be real. But the files, the files, the files, the files have started to, for a lot of people, especially people who were really on the fence about it, they started to really push them towards the idea that maybe this shit is real. Now, in this movie, you see a lot of when the character gets behind the scene and it starts to open his eyes to what's going on, you see. I mean, okay, let me back up. So there's a scene where Michael Clark Duncan's character is bid. So let me back up. What they do is, through mind control, trickery, they tell these people that they are the last people on Earth, and there was a great catastrophe, and the everything is contaminated, and they're the last ones to be able to populate the world. But they have to win this lottery in order to be sent to this island where they're being set free in order to be able to repopulate the world. So I can think it's either day or week or so, they have a lottery, and the lottery is announced on a big screen, and everybody lines up to watch the lottery. And then when the winner is announced, they come on, and the winner does their little speech to everybody, and is all happy. We're going to the island. This is great. So Michael Clark Duncan's character is one of the first ones that we see in the movie that's going to the island. Now, they take them, and everybody's all. Some people are happy, some people are bitter, because they're like, when do I get to go to the island? So the main character, Ewan McGregor, he's one of the ones of these clones that are starting to question the circumstances. And, he's able to sneak behind the scenes, and he starts to see some things. And he manages to get up into another area where, as he's in the hallway of this area he's never seen before, never seen these people, never seen any of the things that's going on, he sees Michael Clark Duncan's character running down the hallway, running away. Now, what they did and what they were doing is his source had some liver problems. So his term in the island was basically they were getting ready to cut him open and take out his organs. And it was crazy because I was a little bit, as I'm watching this, I was a little bit sort of egged out because I kind of went through that kind of a surgery. What they do is cut down and then start pulling out the organs. In my case, they cut down, chopped up the arteries and replaced them with other arteries. Eesh. Anyway. And he managed to get out of the amnesia. And it was like, the fuck is going on here? And he got out the operating room, still cut open. They hadn't started operating on him completely, but they had him cut open. Now, as he's running down the hallway, we see Ewan's character. At that point, it's already confirmed that this is not what it is. He also, prior to seeing that happen with Michael Clark Duncan's character, he was he saw that woman who was giving birth, and because he was sneaking around, he grabbed, you know how they do in the movies. The main character sneaks around. They actually, the second movie is kind of the same thing, where the main characters are able to see something's going on. They get behind the scenes. They dress up and they take some of the uniforms, and then they're able to figure out what's going on. And the other movie I'll talk about in a second. I'm not going to give you the complete rundown of the movie. I definitely suggest watching it, but I just want to emphasize the premise of the movie and then the impact it has, because you see that once Ewan McGregor's character realizes what's going on, because he questioned everything. You see that the impact of these things and how it affects life, and how despite all that they do to suppress life, it always wants to transcend its chains. And essentially, that's all of what's going on in these plots. Is there's, and even in real life, there's these chains, right? So at first, it was physical chains. You were tied to, by the power structure, you were tied to this life physically. Then, and see, doing it that way, it was harder because a person, one, people knew they were being oppressed. So that was, it made it easier to want to rise beyond that, because you see what's going on, you see who your oppressors are, but they learned they absolutely learned there's a better way. So they switched tactics. Don't have to chain them physically. We chain them mentally. We control them mentally. We don't have to spend so much energy to control the masses. We have the masses control the masses. Which leads now into my next movie. So now, in the first movie, we see that the cloning is done as a matter of creating life extension for the donors, using the clones as basically parts factory for when the donor is no longer able to use the original organs or whatever it is, right? So in the case of Michael Clark Duncan's character, it was a liver. Now, in Ewan McGregor's situation, weird. His donor had advanced syphilis, which I guess would have killed him, or something along those lines. And then also Scarlett Johansson's in the movie, and her character, that one was kind of heartbreaking because she had been in some kind of accident or had been really sick, and she found a directory where she was able to, because of course, when you get out of your situation, you want to find out information. So she was able to contact the home where her host or her donor lived, and the donor's child answered the phone, and it was happened to be one of these video phones. Now, this movie was made back in the 90s, so predictive programming, prediction of what's happening in the future. But anyway, this scene was heartbreaking because the little son answered and recognized the woman as the mom, but didn't realize that was a clone. Blah, blah, blah. So just back to my other point. First movies, we see that it's about creating life extensions for rich donors. So, second movie goes into a control aspect. Now, before doing this podcast and actually viewing the movie, I didn't see the movie, but I had an idea because of the conspiracies that how they say that are pervasive. No, just the conspiracies involving that I've kind of been studying for the past years. I mean, I go way back to people like Steve Coakley. He's a real big one. The stuff that he talked about really opened up my eyes. So again, first movie was about creating donors to help create life extension for these rich people. But the second one is about control. And the things that I mentioned before I watched the movie just so happened to be in the fucking movie. So one of the things I was talking about was they would clone specific people in order to control the masses. And I had mentioned how that with a certain crowd that was in these files, when it came to certain tactics, certain things they would do. For certain people, there was sort of the sexual angle. But then when it came to us, it was also life extension in the sense that creating, they would, same thing as from the island, but it was a little bit different for us. It was about control. And this is where I go back to where I was saying about how instead of controlling physically, controlling mentally. So it was controlling with mental chains as opposed to actual chains. Especially when you're talking about a people that our history is marred with chains, but physical. So this is even more diabolical than diabolical than the physical chains that we've been bound to for so many years. This is the display. This displays it, and I'm asking myself, watching this movie, why are they fucking showing this? I mean, they're telling it all. But again, I have to realize cognitive dissonance. One of the things that jumped out to me when first seeing it, and this is one of the reasons why I hate the movie, but then I love the movie. I hate sort of the mirror it puts up to us about how our society is. You know what I mean? And there was so much that was familiar. Even though I'm not like a drug dealer, you know what I mean, or this, that, and the other. I've lived in hoods. I've lived in hoods in Tampa. And a lot of that stuff was all too familiar. Like the strip club. I fucking love the hood strip clubs. I fucking love those. But I digress because I'm getting a little pervy there. It's LaCroix tonight. I don't think too many people were looking at that mirror because it was definitely a mirror. Now, I of course mentioned the control aspect, but how and why? So some of the people that we see that were part of the control mechanism: drug dealers, pimps, preachers, the man on the corner, hookers. A lot of ASMR in the island. So I just had a feeling because I know what the conspiracy is. And we see that played out in this movie. First first off, John Boyega does not sound like that. He acted his ass off in this movie. He had to because we know he's from England. But that hood dude that he played, that's an easy part to play. We see it all too much on TV. And that's the part, that's the thing I hate. I hate that they always put those same tropes in all these movies. The thug, the gangster, the ghetto. This movie was so diabolical. So we see Boyega's character sort of go through and sort of live out the scripted day. And we find out later on it's scripted. And other characters observe these anomalies because through some conflict that's all too familiar in our communities, drug dealing, conflict over the corner, which leads to murder. John Boyega's character is killed. Now another character, Jamie Foxx, just interacted with him. After the interaction, that's when Boyega gets killed. But like I said, this day is scripted. So as his clone is put back into society, he has to relive that day because that's the programming that we later find out is being done. Now, he goes to interact with Jamie Foxx again. But he observes, he's like, yo, we just played this scenario out. So, here comes, I think her name is Tiona Paris. She plays I can't remember her name, but she's in the Marvels. It's not binary, but it's damn, I can't remember her name. I definitely am a fan. Yeah, I am. I think she's hot. I love chocolate. Anyway, pervy moment. She's also a player in this because she was interacting directly with Jamie Foxx, and then peripherally, she have noticed sort of the anomalies as well. Through discovery of what's going on, of course, they find out that, hey, something's off with these trap houses, because they actually go to a trap house. And in the trap house, there's like a laboratory downtown. And in that laboratory, they discover a couple of things. One of the things they discover, right, is a scientist, and he's working on this. There's this powder down there, a white powder. Of course, John Boyega being a drug dealer, Jamie Foxx being a pimp. Jamie takes some of this powder. He also, Boyega also sees one of his clones down there. And they're talking with this lab assistant. And he tells him, we're everywhere. And they kill him. Now, when you start seeing anomalies in one area in life, you see anomalies in every area in life. So through the discovery, they find out that there's certain things, certain proclivities is a word to say, that these controllers, the people behind the scenes, the hidden hand, they've observed as something that they could use as a way to control masses. So in other words, the food, which I mentioned before watching the movie, music, sex, alcohol, church. So essentially what we find out is they used all these different things in order to control people, specific people. Now, as they're going through discovering what's out there, diabolical, they come across one of the, I'll call him overseer, oversees the project. Now, how they come in contact with this overseer, and this is something I mentioned quite a lot. In leaving one of these underground labs where they found out all the cloning that's going on, and it's not only cloning, it's testing. It's testing how certain things would elicit certain reactions from us. So you do see a scene where you have two brothers fighting, and you have some hardcore hip hop going on. And in the hip hop, the words are basically enticing these two men to fight. Then they switch it to a song where it's enticing these two men to be brotherly toward each other and hug each other. Now they stop fighting, and now they're sorry about that, and all huggy and shit. I fucking say this all the time, and they fucking been saying this. The vibration of the music that they play now elicits a certain behavior and a certain response within society. So if you look back in the 70s and the 60s, and even in the early 80s, the music, the hip hop, the soul, the R&B, it was inspirational. It was, let's come together. It was, what's going on. Let's take a look at and examine all of the ills of our community, and there was more unity. And if there were gangs, like we know, like a lot of these Bloods gangs will come out of gangs that were there to protect the communities, and then switch the music up. Now the music is violent. The music is overly sexual. Couple that with the drugs. Couple that with financial instability. Couple that with outside pressures pushing all of these into the community. How do they contain all of that? Right? How do they herd people into these sort of ideologies? Cult of personality. Song by Living Color explained this very much so. You can influence the masses with these personalities. Now, these personalities push social norms, and then now that becomes social norms. And how do you get certain people to do what you want? Now, what we know is there are some questionable things going on where a person would disappear and then reappear. It would look completely different. Similar, but we were told that this is such person. And the movie shows you that what they do is they have certain people, certain figures within the society, the drug dealer, the pimp, the preacher, and these are the people that they would take out the originals and send in the clone to sort of perpetuate the society they want. So how do you mentally... Shit. Wow. That's crazy. Anyway, technical difficulties. So, how do you control people? How do you keep people in these mental chains? What you do is you place certain key people in certain parts of society. You prop them up, and you use that cult of personality in order for them to be able to herd people into certain ideologies. So, in the hood, for a while we had trap music. So all the YNs and the drug dealers, you know what I'm saying, and what they go trapping. We get hungry. We want to eat some quick fried foods. We go to the KFC, the Church's Chicken, oddly enough, or what was the other one? Popeyes. You know, they had the chicken shit in there. There were people eating at the chicken spot, and automatically they start laughing and they start changing their behaviors. Or we see them at church, and we see them in church with the preacher, right? The preacher's preaching a sermon, and then next thing you know, everybody's sort of dancing and gyrating and go to the strip club. Same thing, right? And even in the strip club, you see the DJ changing the music, and the mood changes, and he's controlling people's actions with the music. So with they clone Tyrone, what we see with cloning is they take key members of the black community and then they put their clones in there in order to keep that order. And not only do we see them cloning, but we also see them experimenting on us. Like I was mentioning about the fighting, experimenting with the hair products, of course, the drugs, the food, the music, and it's all supported by their network of clones who are doing the bidding of the masters. And one of the things that we see in both movies, how do you imprint these memories of the clones? So you see in both movies, there's a scene where you have the clones laying down and they're being pumped in with all these images. Again, tell live vision. So they're using the visuals to imprint these memories. Of course, also music. They're affecting the vibratory nature of the being in order to imprint the lies into the clone. Definitely got to watch the movie. Now there is an aspect of the movie where, and this isn't all the movies, where the protagonist sort of wins and it rises above the circumstances. But I got to go back to and send everybody back to a movie called 1984. Where it said in the movie that this control system is set to control forever. So essentially what's happening is you move from the physical restraints, which we all can see, we all know something's wrong, and it's, of course, we also see who's doing it because they have to actually physically oppress. They move from that to mental chains. A lot harder to see, a lot harder to know who's actually doing it. And that's displayed in They Clone Tyrone. Because you don't see who's actually doing it, because this is the people in your community. This is the people you see every day. This is the people that you do business with. This is you frequently around, the people that you share energy with. And they uphold the status quo, and you, the uninitiated, follow through. The last thing that I'm only going to mention about this, they show you who's doing it. I'm not going to expound upon that because they are the overlords right now. As said by one of these bootlicking politicians, they're the masters of the universe right now. Yeah, it's all coming out. They're putting it in your face. So now it's up to everybody to either listen to it or just be run over by it. You know, most of us are going to ideally and hopefully at some point pass away from this earth. But then those of us are going to have to live under the control system that we leave behind. And it's just sad. And there's some of us also will never be able to leave the earth. Because the control system has found ways to use your essence in order to fuel their oppression. And there's some of us that may never leave this earth. Especially those of you taking the vid. Anyway, the day is long, the sun is hot. You might as well smoke if you got your pot. I'm out.